Charlie and I have thought about options all our life. I mean, my guess is Charlie was thinking about that in grade school. And, you know, and I mean, you have to understand, you don't have to understand Black Scholes at all, but you have to understand the utility and in a general sense the value of options, and you have to understand the cost of issuing options, which is a very unpopular subject in certain quarters. Any option has value. I mean, I bought a house in 1958 for $31,500. And let's assume the seller of that house had said to me, I'd like an option on it, good in perpetuity, at $200,000. Well, that wouldn't have seemed like it cost me much if I'd given it to him. But an option has value. Any option has value. And that's why some people who are, you know, kind of slick in business matters sometimes get options for very little or for nothing. I'm not talking about stock options. I'm just talking about an option to purchase anything. They get options for far less than really a market value would be. Black Scholes is an attempt to measure the market value of options, and it cranks in certain variables, but the most important variable that cranks in that might be subject, well, it might be a case where if you had differing views you could make some money, but it's based upon the past volatility of the asset involved, and past volatilities are not the best judge of value. I mean, if you looked at a 5-year option on Berkshire stock at various times, Berkshire stocks had a fairly low beta, as they call it. The beta is a measure that people in academia always like to give Greek names to things that are fairly simple, and so that they have sort of a priesthood, you know. So it's, you know, it's like priest talking in Latin or something. I mean, it kind of cows the laity, but beta is a measure of past volatility. Berkshire's had a low volatility, but that didn't mean that the option value of it to anybody that really understood the business was lower than a stock with a higher beta. And I think what Charlie said is that last year is that for longer term options in particular, Black Scholes can give some silly results. I mean, it misprices things, but it's a mechanical system. And any mechanical system in securities markets is going to misprice things from time to time. And that's, we made one, as I mentioned last year, we made one large commitment that basically was, had somebody on the other side of it using Black Scholes and using market prices, took the other side of it, and we made $120 million last year. And we love the idea of other people using mechanistic formulas to price things, because they may be right 99 times out of 100, but we don't have to play those 99 times. We just play the one time when we have a differing view. Charlie, you want to comment on?
Yeah, but Black Scholes is what I would call a know-nothing value system. If you don't know anything at all about value compared with price, in other words, if price is teaching you all that can be known, then Black Scholes on a very short-term basis is a pretty good guess, you know, for what a 90-day option may be worth in some stock or another. The minute you get into longer-term options where you don't have the know-nothing factor so extreme, it's crazy to use Black Scholes. People use it just because they want some kind of a mechanical system. But at Costco, for instance, within a fairly short period, we issued stock options at 30, and we also issued stock options at 60. And Black Scholes valued the options we issued at 60 as a strike price way higher than the options we issued at 30. Well, this is insane.
Well, we like a certain amount of insanity.
Yeah, well, it's good for Warren, who picked up this extra $120 million. But So he's fonder of this kind of insanity than I am.
No, we will pay you real money if you will deliver to our offices at Kiewit Plaza somebody who wants to use the Black-Scholes model and is willing to price 100 options for 3 years, using the Black-Scholes model and letting us pick and choose among those. Because, as Charlie says, it's a know-nothing affair. And we are know-nothing guys in respect to an awful lot of things. But every now and then we find something where we think we know something. And anybody that's using a mechanistic formula is going to get in trouble in that situation. But options have value. I mean, we issued options in a sense last year when we sold the 400 million of bonds, and we know what we're giving up when we sell those bonds. I mean, we may have gotten a negative coupon of sorts, but that's because we gave up option value. And then it isn't truly a negative cost instrument at all, because options have value. Let's go to number 4.
Hello, my name is Martin Wiegand from Bethesda, Maryland. And first I'd like to thank you and all the folks working here at the microphones and staffing the booths for hosting this wonderful shareholders weekend. We enjoy your efforts.
Thanks, Martin.
My question is about a company getting its employee compensation aligned with shareholder interest. Charlie Munger, in one of his outstanding Investor Digest interviews, cites the case of FedEx getting it right. In the newspapers, we've all just read about American Airlines, Bethlehem Steel, and a lot of other companies getting it wrong. I find precious little written about compensation systems. Would you share with us how you get it right at Berkshire Companies? Also, your old golf coach and racetrack friend Bob Dwyer asked me if you would like to share with us your pick in the Kentucky Derby.
Is Bob back there with you, Martin?
No, in the middle.
Oh, Bob. Yeah, Bob and I did spend a lot of time at the racetrack in high school. He was not only the basketball coach at Woodrow Wilson High, but he was also the golf coach. And whenever I wanted to go to the races, he would write an excuse to my other teachers saying that we had to go out for the golf team. And then we would head off to Charleston or Havre de Grace or Pimlico or someplace, and he cleaned up his act subsequently. It's good to have Bob with us. He was known for his famous 3-iron shots. He was known as Trolley Wire Dwyer in those days. Charlie, do you want to talk about comp a little?
Well, as the shareholders know, our system is different from that of most big corporations. We think it's less capricious. The stock option system will give extraordinarily liberal awards sort of by accident to some people, and it will deny other people any reward at all at some different time, in spite of great contributions made by the people who are getting nothing. So, except where we inherit it, we just don't use it. But we must be in a minority far less than 1%, right?
It's where we like to be, right? No, it's interesting. We inherited some stock options at Berkshire, primarily in the General Re transaction, and not through any failing of anybody, or there's no aspersion to be cast, but at all. But those options turned out to be quite valuable. They would not have been valuable if General Re had been left alone as a standalone company. They profited from the fact that other parts of Berkshire did well, and the money went to the people that had these options, who delivered nothing to the performance of Berkshire for a while. Now that is not an indictment of anybody in the least at Gen Re. It's an indictment of an option system which represents a lottery ticket and also a royalty on the passage of time, because as you know, an option holder has benefits from retained earnings and benefits not at all from dividends. And that puts his interest, maybe quite contrary to that of the shareholders. So we believe in paying for performance, but we believe in tying performance to what is actually under the reasonable control of the person that's being measured. And we to give a lottery ticket on the overall results of Berkshire Hathaway to someone who is running a business that's 1% of the whole is really crazy. And I would say that you have seen probably more misdirected compensation throughout the corporate system, corporate America in the last 5 years, than in the 100 years before that. It's been extraordinary. And there was wealth creation in the 90s, just like in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. But there was a wealth transfer like had never been experienced before. And you can't blame people for wanting to cash in on it. If anybody wants to walk up and hand me a half a dozen lottery tickets for the Nebraska lottery, I'll accept them. But it will have nothing to do with how I do in terms of running Berkshire. Actually, Charlie and I think a properly designed option system, which includes cost of capital and some other factors, and ties it to the performance of the people involved, we think that can make sense when we've used various incentive programs that are similar to that. But the idea of just passing them out and telling people that for 10 years they get a free ride and then repricing, if your stock goes down, their stock doesn't go down, their option price goes down, that is not our idea of a great compensation system.
If we are right with our general approach, it has considerably important implications, because the natural implication is that more than 99% of corporate compensation systems are more than a little crazy in America. And I want to emphasize that Berkshire is not illiberal. I mean, we've got various incentive systems out where people make tens of millions and may make hundreds of millions. So we're not against rewards for people who make vast contributions, but a system that's basically capricious and which doesn't tailor the results per person and per activity very well, we just think it's crazy.
We love to see people that are associated with Berkshire making money, as long as they're making money for you at the same time. It's very simple. But we don't want them to get a free ride off your money. Compensation's an interesting subject, and I'm going to write about it next year some. But it's not a market system. You can read all you want. I mean, the PR people will tell you, that Joe Smith's compensation was determined by a market system, and he's just like a baseball player or anything of the sort. But he's not just like a baseball player. The baseball player negotiates with somebody who's spending his money to hire the baseball player and making a calculation whether he's better off laying out the money out of his own pocket, the owner of the team, to get that player. But when you get a comp committee at a large American corporation, you have somebody with an enormous interest in the amount of comp on one side of the table, and you've got somebody on the other side of the table who was not picked because they were the Doberman of the board, believe me, and who is dealing with what many times is what my friend Tom Murphy used to call play money. I mean, it's almost meaningless to the person on one side of the table whether somebody gets 100,000 shares of restricted stock or 1,000,000 shares of restricted stock, and it's not meaningless to the guy on the other side of the table. Almost every other negotiation in American business, you have some parity of concern, but you do not have a parity of concern, in terms of comp at the top levels. You have a parity of concern when you get down to labor unions. I mean, the management wants to keep down the prices, and the union wants to get more money, and that's a real negotiation. And you have lots of other real negotiations in American business, but the compensation in many companies, not all obviously, but in many companies, has not been a real negotiation at all. And the management has hired comp consultants to come in, and I have never seen a comp consultant come in and say we ought to reduce this guy's salary. I've also never seen a comp consultant come in and say, why don't you get rid of this bozo? They can't all be wonderful, but can Can you imagine a comp consultant doing that, never getting another assignment? It wouldn't happen. So it's a bad system, and it needs improvement. And it may be getting a little improvement. And as I wrote in the annual report this year, what happens with comp is the acid test of corporate reform. Because frankly, the CEOs of America, they don't care whether their boards are diverse or not diverse or anything of the sort. They care about how much money they make in a great many cases. And you, the owners, and big owners in particular, have to provide some countervailing force, or you'll have what you've had in the last 20 years, which is an enormous disparity in the rates of compensation of people at the top compared to people at the bottom, and also a disconnect between the comp of people running businesses and the results of the owners who gave them the money. So arise, shareholder. Let's go to number 5.